Hello guys, this is a new fanfiction called Hurricane Sweet. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 1. Prologue. A not so normal Naruto. The sun broke the horizon, bathing the forests in golden light. The dull and repetitive sounds of fists impacting wood echoed around the clearing that encompassed training ground number 9. The training ground was entirely unremarkable, a medium-sized clearing that held 2 tree stumps in the middle of it, and nothing else. It held no impressive backstory. It didn't even have an unimpressive one at that. Training Ground 9 was just another training ground, one of the many that were spaced around the great village that was Konohagakure no Sato. It was small, out of the way, and used very little by the general shinobi populace. All of that suited the 10-year-old Uzumaki Naruto just fine. Being out of the way and secluded was exactly how the orphan liked it. Having grown up a neglected ward of the great ninja village, Naruto had, more often than not, been looked upon less than favorably by the general populace. He, like the rest of the orphans in the village, was a reminder that Konoha wasn't absolutely perfect. He was a stain, if one chose to look at it that way. His existence was a blemish on the otherwise immaculate reputation that the continent's most powerful hidden village boasted. The boy had a head topped with a tuft of shining golden blonde hair, and 2 piercing blue eyes adorned his visage. He was dressed in a black short-sleeved shirt with a collar that reached up towards his chin. Beige shinobi pants covered his legs, and were taped at the ankle, leading into standard black shinobi sandals. The hands that pounded an innocent training log were wrapped in white bandages. Many would ask why a boy of 10 years would be training his body at the break of dawn. The answer was that this was a special day for Naruto. It was the day he graduated Konoha's Ninja Academy. Again, Naruto had entered Konoha's Ninja Academy 4 years previously, at the ripe age of 6, with nothing but the clothes on his back, and the name given to him by his mother, Uzumaki Kushina. From there, Naruto had been taking the steps to achieving the dream that he had had for as long as he could remember. To become a respected Konoha Jonin and raise a respectable family with his name. To make the Uzumaki known once more. Naruto was one of many orphans in Konohagakure, and thus, the idea of a family was one that had permeated his mind for many years. All that he knew about his family was that his mother was named Uzumaki Kushina, and had been one of the many ninjas who had been killed in the Kyuubi attack 1 year after he had been born. His father was unknown and was liable to stay that way. Naruto had made his way through the academy doggedly and methodically, clawing and scraping the skills that were necessary to have him proclaimed as the Rookie of the Year, 3 full years before his scheduled graduation. No one had called him a genius, and he had never considered himself to be one. His skills had taken everyone, including the academy instructors, by surprise. He didn't take to jutsu any faster than anyone else, thrown weapons were no easier for him to handle than for any other person in his class, and he didn't absorb knowledge like a sponge. He merely had a goal to achieve and the work ethic and motivation to back it up. When Uzumaki Naruto had his mind set to do something, one could rest assured that it would get done. That was just the way he was. He wasn't the heir to some lost and obscure bloodline, nor was he the child of any particularly renowned shinobi or kunoichi. His mother had been a foreign chunin given asylum. His graduating position at the top had been a result of him working for hours and hours more than his peers. Nothing more and nothing less. That had been 1 year ago. 1 year ago he had been on top of his very own world and on the fast track to achieving his dream. He knew that it would take a lot more effort, a lot more work, but effort was never something he had a problem giving. The feelings of elation and accomplishment had all come crashing down shortly after he had met his Jonin sensei, Hada Kakashi. The 23-year-old A-rank shinobi prodigy had slammed the then 9-year-old back down to earth and had proceeded to crush his dreams underfoot. The bell test had proven to be a challenge that not even Naruto's work ethic and determination could overcome. Tired, hungry, and bogged down by teammates whose combined skill didn't measure up to his own, Naruto had failed the test spectacularly. The notion of teamwork hadn't dawned on him until the very end, and by then it had been far too late. There had been no second chance at success. The trio of genin one-ups had been sent back to the academy stinging. His pride wounded, Naruto had prepared himself for a year of review and training, before he would hopefully be resorted into a new team. That had not been the case, however. One of the lesser-known programs in Konoha was the Shinobi Reserve Program. The program took the failed graduates of the regular academy and put them through a rigorous accelerated training regimen that was designed to turn out Chunin-level shinobi and kunoichi. It had been instigated by the Nidaime Hokage once it was discovered that less than 50% of all of the academy graduates were actually passed by their Jonin instructors due to failings of some sort. A system that turned out fewer than 15 new shinobi per year was one that simply wasn't pragmatic, not even for the largest of ninja villages. Naruto had taken to the accelerated training much as he had to everything else in his life, with the same dogged determination that had won him his skills. When he wasn't in class reinforcing what he already knew, he was in his clearing, drilling. The blonde had entered into the program knowing that his dream of Jonin rank was nearly destroyed entirely. The graduates of the reserve program could never obtain the rank of jonin. That title was reserved for the students of the elite, almost exclusively, unless they became captains of an Anbu squad, or were given a field promotion from the Hokage. Both were long reaches by any stretch of the mill. The result was that many of Konoha's chunin ended up being just as strong as many of the jonin. Just because they couldn't feasibly reach the rank by conventional means, didn't mean that many of them didn't try. Beyond that, many graduates entered the Anbu Black Ops, in order to serve their village as one of the masked elite. The realization that his dream was so far out of reach had greatly depressed the boy, for all of about 5 minutes, before he had thrown himself back into his training with a fervor that was nearly inhuman. He had his goal and he would reach it, no matter what it took. Every day of the next year of his life had been spent training in some way or another. From dawn until 9 in the morning, he would train his body physically and work on his taijutsu katas. He would eat a meal composed of cold cereal and a protein shake for breakfast at 9, and then make his way to class. Class lasted until 1:30 in the afternoon. It was some of the most boring time of Naruto's young life. From then until 4, he would train in weapons. Everything from shuriken to senbon and the practical application of ninja wire were drilled during that 2.5-hour period. He would break for a modest lunch for 1 hour, before going back to drill his chakra control and basic hand seals. The simple and often overlooked aspects of shinobi life were concentrated upon and drilled to near perfection. He was a workhorse and a perfectionist at heart. And he'd be damned if he was undone by something so simple. It was the small details that killed, after all. Directly following his chakra control practices, Naruto would train and attempt to master whatever particular jutsu he happened to be working on. His mastery was more about understanding the ins and outs of the technique, rather than simply quitting after he had managed to perform it. The ability to further modify ninjutsu was something that greatly interested him, and his own perfectionist tendencies would hardly allow for him to leave a technique not fully dissected. As a result, he was familiar with fewer ninjutsu than he might have liked. But he could say with certainty that he had mastered the few he knew. By that time, the day was nearly over and Naruto retired to his small 1-bedroom and 1-bathroom apartment. He would eat his dinner, and would proceed to meditate and research ninjutsu. Ninjutsu could not be practiced by oneself, so Naruto devoted his evenings to researching the art of illusion crafting. He trained all aspects of shinobi life equally in order to become what he felt was the epitome of shinobi, the perfect all-rounder. The jack of all trades, or the glorified generalizer, as he called it. That brought him to his current position today, pounding his fists into a log at the crack of dawn the day of his graduation from Konoha's reserve program. The exam was scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. And all of the potential graduates were supposed to meet at 8:45 at the entrance to Training Ground 44, known to many as the Forest of Death. As soon as the potential graduates had been informed by their instructor as to the location of the exam, Naruto had done some immediate scouting and research. Training Ground 44 was a booby trap in and of itself, and for that reason it was used for the survival part of the Chunin selection exams, whenever they happened to be in Konoha. The research had produced results that were decidedly unappealing. Any objective that was to be found in the Forest of Death meant that the final exam would be a survival test. It wasn't that Naruto was bad at survival tests, he wasn't bad at anything one thing in particular, he just didn't like them. And they always tested stamina, something that he had too little of to be happy with at 10 years old. Feeling his fist impact the log for the 2000th time that morning, Naruto stopped his punches. He carefully unwrapped the bandages that had covered his hands and wrists, and placed the white material into his back pocket, directly next to his shuriken pouch. Making his way out of the clearing, Naruto broke into a jog. While normally he would stay and complete his taijutsu training, he didn't want to tire his body unnecessarily before his survival exam. That, and he needed time to properly digest a good breakfast. A ninja couldn't function properly on an empty stomach, now could he? The breeze ruffled the hair and clothes of the gathered shinobi, as the Forest of Death loomed ominously behind them. Checking his watch, Naruto saw that the time was exactly 8:45, as he stepped through the gate that led to Training Ground 44. A ninja is never late, nor is he early. A ninja arrives precisely when he is supposed to, Naruto recited in his mind. The second his foot touched the ground of Training Ground 44, Naruto was planning. His sky-blue eyes scanned the crowd of shinobi hopefuls, not stopping on anyone in particular, but assessing everyone. This was a survival exercise, and that meant that anyone and everyone was a potential enemy. The ones grouped together and tittering nervously would pose no real threat unless they attacked him all at once. They held no confidence in their skills, and even the smallest lack of confidence was exploitable. The same went for those who stood mostly alone and arrogant in their posture, but for a different reason. The confident swagger and an air of self-assurance were good for a shinobi to have. It displayed confidence, and could set the tone of a confrontation. But the overbearing arrogance displayed by many of the reserve students was appalling. They reminded him of the one student he had bypassed during his stint at the regular academy, Hyuga or something. Do you think they owned the world? Naruto wondered with amusement. The thought was sobered by the fact that he had been much the same way only 1 year ago, before he met Hada Kakashi that was. While he may not like the Jonin, he had to at least mentally thank him for showing him that he wasn't as good as he had thought. Everyone got their reality check at some point. He knew he would be glad that he got his early, rather than later. Moving to stand with the rest of the hopeful, Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of one of the proctors speaking up. Listen up, runts. A proctor with silver hair began. My name is Taji Mizuki, and I'm gonna be the proctor for this exam. The scowl on the man's face was designed to look intimidating. Naruto thought it laughable. The man wasn't imposing in the slightest. As a Chunin of Konoha, you are expected to take on the majority of the missions that come through the mission office B ranks, the silver-haired man named Mizuki continued. A B-rank mission can be anything from guard duty to a search and destroy mission that may be vital to village security. Naruto found himself bored with the man's speech. It didn't contain any information he didn't already know, and he just wanted to get this exam over with. He was looking forward to treating himself to a congratulatory bowl of Ichiraku ramen afterwards. Best stuff in the world that ramen was. Your mission today will consist of the retrieval of a scroll from the innermost point of the forest, the central tower. Your objective is located at the topmost point of the tower, and there are only 25 total scrolls. With 51 of you here today, that means that roughly 50% of you will pass, Mizuki said. The sound of nervous tittering from hopefuls followed. Naruto raised an eyebrow in question. The test seemed fairly simple overall, and the only way he could see it becoming harder was if there was an imposed time limit. The man seemed to read Naruto's thoughts. Your time limit is 1 day and 1 day only, the Chunin said. Shock mingled with no small amount of outrage from the general populace. Even Naruto was wary of the short amount of time. You fail if you fail to retrieve a scroll, or are otherwise subdued. Killing is not permitted, under any circumstances. The last statement managed to shut the crowd up pretty fast. Killing one's comrades was looked down upon in all but the most barbaric of villages, and the thought that someone among them might kill one of them in order to pass was an uneasy thought. All examinees are to report to a gate in groups of 3, no more, no less. I trust that you are able to divide yourselves evenly, Mizuki finished, a rather poor attempt at a sneer marring his face. As the Chunin hopefuls rapidly moved towards a gate of their choice, Naruto calmly walked forward to the first gate, the one where Mizuki had been standing. He was quickly joined by 2 others who had taken his example. One boy who looked decidedly nervous, and a girl who looked too confident for her own good. The girl flipped her long red hair over her left shoulder, as she sneered down at the younger, and undeniably shorter, Naruto. Naruto, for his part, merely smiled pleasantly in response as the girl opened her mouth. Given how short you are, you must be that little phenom that everyone was talking about earlier, the unnamed girl said with a sneer still firmly etched on her face. And that's a bad thing. The blonde thought snidely. The pleasant smile didn't slip for a moment as Naruto shot back. That's me, I guess. You seem to have me at a disadvantage though, stranger. Isn't it usually polite to introduce yourself before you jump into a conversation? The sneer merely deepened at Naruto's statement. The young boy decided to find a teacher to help him perfect a sneer like that. Gee. All you need to know, runt, is that I'm gonna show what a real ninja is once we get in that forest. The girl promptly turned her back on Naruto before he could make a response. Oh really? Naruto asked skeptically. His smile dissolved into a fierce smirk. Tell me, stranger, I wasn't aware that real ninja wore white. Correct me if I'm wrong. The girl simply leveled Naruto with a glare that could freeze the tropical waters of sea country, as the other boy chuckled slightly to himself. Naruto took the ensuing silence to look over his peers once more. The girl was indeed wearing white. It was part of a form-fitting dress that the girl wore, that would allow for the maximum range of movement. Intermingled with red, the white dress was certainly pretty, and even functional, while it flattered the kunoichi in training's developing curves, generously not that the 10-year-old Naruto cared all that much. Even so, the fact that the color scheme would stick out like a sore thumb amongst the green that permeated the forest of death, overruled the practicality of the dress. Shifting his blue eyes to the boy who was now costily leaning against a wire fence, Naruto noted that the once nervous boy was now quite comfortable with his situation. Dressed in a forest green shirt and black pants, the boy sported a pragmatic look, given the situation. The look was further augmented by the slightly bulging weapons pouches that he carried on him, and the black bandana that covered his hair. At least he looks competent, Naruto mused. For all he knew, the boy could be as bad as the dead last who had been dumped on his team the year before. Incompetent retard that he was, Naruto thought uncharitably. How about you then? Naruto addressed the boy. What's your name? Kishimoto Akira, at your service, the boy said with a fake pompousness in both that was humorous despite the serious situation. Naruto smiled back. He liked pleasant people. Uzumaki Naruto, at your service. Future Jonin. Rei's brows met his pronouncement. You seem confident in yourself. You do know that the road to Jonin is a real long one for a reserve grad, don't you? Akira inquired. The smile only got wider. Course I do. Won't stop me, though, Naruto proclaimed confidently. I know what I need to do and I'm no stranger to hard work. Akira seemed to appraise the short blonde once more before giving a curt nod. Well, good luck then. Naruto nodded back in response. Enough chatter down there, the Chunin gate guard said from his post above them. I'm about to open the gate. Let the test begin. Mizuki's voice blared over the hidden speakers at the gates. The words had barely registered, and the gate had not even fully opened before Naruto blurred into motion. Using speed that had been gained over countless hours of training, Naruto's right hand dipped into his leg holster and withdrew a kunai. No one had time to react before Naruto viciously slammed it into the back of the unsuspecting red-heated girl's head. As the unconscious body slumped to the forest floor, Naruto formed a single hand seal. A second Naruto formed from the ground behind the stunned Akira and tapped the back of the boy's head. The smile on Naruto's face was bittersweet as he watched the boy's eyes roll backwards as he too slumped to the ground in unconsciousness. Too bad, Naruto stated to no one in particular. He supposed that he was addressing the now gaping Chunin guard. That was the way of the ninja world though. The strong prospered while the weak and hesitant stumbled and were lorded over, waiting expectantly and plotting for the day when they would become the strong. Many others were cut down before their time to shine. Akira was a prime example. At least the boy had a chance to break out of the sleep-inducing Jinjutsu Naruto had placed on him. Perhaps he would acquit himself well by stealing a scroll from some unsuspecting wannabe. The girl, however, wasn't so lucky. Naruto sneered in distaste at the deed. She would be lucky to wake up in anything less than 10 hours. Even then she would probably still have a concussion. Bitch should have called me a runt. Reholstering his kunai, Naruto dispelled his Tsuchibunshin with a minor application of chakra. That particular technique would serve him well in the future, and he was glad he had taken the time to properly master it. Being able to form the solid clone with only one seal was something that would prove to be invaluable in a sticky situation. It was something he had prided himself on, as Earth wasn't his primary chakra affinity. Winking cheekily, the flaxen-haired youth gave the still-floored Chunin a two-fingered salute before bursting into the forest of death at breakneck speed. Naruto cursed his lack of forethought as he blocked the swipe of a kunai. That one would have sliced open his jugular and left him all but a defenseless, bleeding, soon-to-be corpse. Leaping backwards to put space between himself and his attacker, Naruto unleashed a hail of shuriken. The bladed weapons didn't connect, as expected, but they managed to push his enemy off of the attack for the moment. In hindsight, it was borderline retardation to think that there wouldn't be guards surrounding the tower where his objective laid. Naruto had made it through training ground 44 with little trouble, and with nothing but a few minor altercations with some other trainees. The small skirmishes had left him with a few bruises and scratches, but nothing more. The phrase "you should see the other guy" would have been appropriate. After reaching the tower, the 10-year-old blonde had calmly made his way towards the tower's entrance, where he was immediately set upon by a man who he assumed to be one of the examiners, an assumption made based on the Chunin vest the man wore. That had been exactly 1 minute and 17 seconds ago. Not many ninja battles made it past the 1-minute mark. The element of surprise made that doubly so in the field. As Naruto kawarimied with a nearby log and flipped through a series of quick seals, he figured that the only reason he was still alive was the fact that the examiner wasn't trying to kill him. A movement in the corner of his right eye alerted him to the presence of his attacker charging him, a kunai hurtling towards his position. A smirk spread across the boy's face as he felt the kunai pass by him 1 meter to the right. Illusion in place. As the Chunin sprinted towards him in a zigzag pattern, Naruto channeled chakra into his legs and disappeared in a shunshin. The nameless Chunin was moving quickly to cover the ground between himself and Naruto, so when Naruto's outstretched arm made contact with the Jinjutsu-influenced man's solar plexus, it was as if the man had run headlong into a stone wall, with the speed of both himself and Naruto combined. The Chunin, under the influence of Naruto's small Jinjutsu, was unconscious before the pain could register. It was a moot point, however, as he would have been unconscious anyway, the second his back made contact with a tree some 5 meters away. The fight had lasted exactly 1 minute and 35 seconds. As Naruto quickly checked to make sure the man was still alive, he had hit the tree quite hard. He cradled his throbbing right arm. The attack had been a spur-of-the-moment idea of his, and had proven itself effective. He would have to make sure that he reinforced his arm properly in the future, though he had nearly dislocated his shoulder. Lariat, he thought with a small touch of pride, I'll have to remember to write that down. It would go right next to his first original Jinjutsu on his personal scroll. The Konyarazu no Jutsu, the Jinjutsu Naruto had used to trick his Chunin assailant into believing he was a meter from his actual position, was a technique of his own making. The Chunin had a steady pulse, so Naruto felt comfortable leaving him where he was. Another examiner would find him, no doubt. Turning his attention to the tower, Naruto went over his knowledge of the exam. His target objective would most likely be at the top. They'll be expecting me to enter through the top windows. It would be what a shinobi would do after all. It would be best to think outside the box in that case. Forming a single hand seal, Naruto formed a Tsuchibunshin in the foliage behind him. Using a quick Hawarimi, he replaced himself with it, and commanded it to approach the tower from the outside. As the clone left, he cloaked himself in his Kokoni Razu no Jutsu and overlapped it with a Niju Kokoni Razu no Jutsu. If anyone actually managed to spot him entering the front door, he would have sufficient cover. Not to mention that any assailant would have to dispel 2 Jinjutsu to even find him. Not many ninja thought to look past a single Jinjutsu for one that may have been beneath it. Shaking himself out of his thoughts on the failings of many shinobi, Naruto quietly moved to the front door of the tower. It would be best to simply get the test over with. While he felt that he was probably the first to the tower, arrogant as it was, he knew that it wouldn't be long until other trainees managed to catch up. He trusted his skills though, and strode confidently into the tower that held the key to his shinobi future. "Mind if I join you?" A smooth voice spoke up from behind Naruto. Turning away from his steaming bowl of pork ramen, Naruto's eyes found the figure of Taiji Mizuki. The silver-haired proctor was visible through the white flaps that served as an entrance into the Ichiraku ramen stand. Behind the silver-haired chunin stood a young woman with short black hair and a chunin vest. She had her arms folded under her chest and seemed to be waiting impatiently. "Not at all. Company's always appreciated." Naruto addressed his former proctor with a smile. He seemed pleasant enough, outside the constraints of duty that was. A smile appeared on the man's face. "Great then." Turning to address the woman waiting outside, he continued, "Why don't you head home, Tsubaki-chan? I won't be long." The short-haired woman sighed lightly. "Alright then, but don't take too long." She leaned in and gave the man a quick peck on the cheek, before leaping to the roof on the other side of the road. Mizuki looked after her fondly, but with a touch of annoyance. "Is that any way to say goodbye to your boyfriend?" "I don't think so," he mumbled. Naruto choked back a chuckle. After she had disappeared, the silver-haired chunin moved inside the stand and sat on a stool next to Naruto. "I'll have a medium miso ramen, please," he ordered to the stand owner. "That choice," Naruto cooked from beside him, in between bites of his own ramen. "That one's my favorite." Mizuki nodded in agreement. "Yeah, miso is good. A friend got me into it a few years back, and I haven't stopped eating it since." "You've got a smart friend there, Taoji-san." Naruto nodded his approval. "Mizuki, please. We're coworkers now, aren't we, Naruto-san?" Mizuki asked with a smile as his ramen appeared in front of him. "That's so," Naruto agreed. A quick glance down at his new chunin flak vest over his usual black attire brought a smile to the young chunin's face. "Indeed. In fact, that was what I was hoping to talk to you about." Naruto raised a blonde eyebrow. "You were looking for me? What for?" Mizuki paused in the slipping of his noodles to cast a glance at his 10-year-old companion. "Partly the rumors that seem to be circling you now, but mostly because I was hoping to introduce myself. Properly, I mean," he quickly amended. "The little intro I gave yesterday hardly counts." Naruto barked a laugh. "Are you always that intimidating?" Mizuki had the grace to blush and look sheepish. "Oh well, I guess I didn't do such a great job with the intimidation factor, did I? It's not really my thing." "Nope." Naruto asked for his bill and pushed his bowl away before turning to his colleague. "So what do you want to know?" he inquired. "I doubt that you would come to introduce yourself if you didn't have questions." "Well, you're right about that," Mizuki began. "I guess I found myself intrigued after I heard the report from one of the gate guards about how you entered the forest." Naruto nodded with a barely noticeable smirk at the memory. He was proud of that little moment of quick thinking. "I watched the tape earlier, so I figured that I would do a little digging. And you came to me for some answers," Naruto finished for him. "So, how many people did you ask before you found out that I came here all the time?" He was surprised, and a little flattered, that the man was taking an interest in him. Maybe his skills were finally starting to be recognized. If Mizuki was unsettled by the boy's perceptiveness, he didn't show it. "Just one actually, you mean Oruka. You know him, I suppose." Naruto nodded in recognition. The scarred chunin, an academy teacher to Naruto's knowledge, frequented Ichiraku's quite a bit. The two had crossed paths more than once. "Yes, I know Oruka." "So, what do you want to know?" Mizuki appraised the boy for a few seconds before starting. "Well, there are a few that I'd like to ask, but you look like you want to leave, so I'll be quick." Naruto nodded. He did want to be getting home soon. "What exactly is someone of your age and talent doing in the reserve program?" Mizuki asked, his full attention on Naruto. Naruto scoffed lightly. He knew that the man would ask that. "Long story, but I'll give you the quick version." Mizuki nodded in agreement, so Naruto continued. "I graduated at the top of my class last year, and had the misfortune of being on Hada Kakashi's genin team." The silver-haired man winced whilst nodding. The young jonin was becoming notorious for the failing of every genin squat given to him. "Yeah, that'll do it, I suppose. It still is a bit of a surprise though. It's not every day that the top rookie gets sent to the reserves." A sagely nod met his statement. "Yeah, though it's been good for me. I was a right arrogant prick out of the academy." Mizuki started a little at the admission. Naruto wasn't someone who he had pegged as arrogant at all, confident and self-assured, but not arrogant. The boy actually seemed fairly humble, but it might have been an effect of the last year. "Well," Naruto said, shaking Mizuki out of his thoughts, "it was nice meeting you. Maybe we'll work together on some missions in the future." The thought wasn't unappealing to the blonde 10-year-old. Mizuki came across as someone who he could trust. Probably not, Mizuki replied with a small wince. I'm starting a stint at the academy in a week. Iruka's class actually. The old assistant got promoted to Takubetsu Jonin. It was Naruto's turn to wince in sympathy. Ouch. That class has Sarutobi in it. He noted that Mizuki's eyes darkened when he spoke the name of the village's resident prankster, though it was for a different reason than Naruto thought. Yeah, Mizuki replied grimly. I take it you're not a fan of the boy's art. Naruto scoffed in derision. Hardly. The kid is an idiot and an insult. He has the Shinobi no Kami as his grandfather, and that elite tutor Abisu training him, and he spends his time pranking the villagers. It's no wonder that half the village seems to hate him. Mizuki merely nodded. He couldn't trust himself to say anything about the boy without breaking the Sandame's law. Naruto was only a year older than Konohamaru after all, skill and maturity notwithstanding. Well, I hope to see you around then, if we won't be on missions together. Naruto stuck out his hand with a smile. Mizuki grasped the outstretched hand firmly. Indeed. Have a good night, Naruto-san. And you? The wind was a silent whisper in the evening atop the Hokage monument. Naruto felt it tussle his hair gently as he stood atop the head of the yondaime. He came up here every so often in order to watch the sunset. With the monument facing northwest, it provided a spectacular view. It was a bit of a thinking spot for him, a place where he could gather his thoughts after an interesting day. And what a day it had been. He had made Chunin, not that there had been any real doubt in his mind that he would. It was an eventuality to Naruto. Just like he knew that he would become Jonin one day. Just like he knew that he would make the Uzumaki name known throughout the elemental nations once more. Would you be proud of me, mother? He wondered as he turned his gaze to the east, towards the sea and the former Whirlpool country. The former home of the once respected Uzumaki clan, Whirlpool country, had been decimated at the tail end of the Second Secret Shinobi War. Its former inhabitants were some of the war's final casualties. Not much was known about the once respected nation, only that it had once played host to the Uzumaki clan. The clan that had been decimated the same day Whirlpool had been wiped off of the face of the planet. There had been only 2 survivors. Uzumaki Kushina, his mother, was the only one who managed to make it to Fire Country in Konoha. She had been 7 years old. From there, her shinobi career began. It was one filled with many missions and strife due to the outbreak of the Third Secret War, and Kushina had made Chunin at the young age of 12, in the short-lived peacetime between conflicts. She had never made it any further. Presumably, she had met Naruto's father somewhere along the way, and the two had him when Kushina was 21. Naruto had no idea who his father was, and really had no desire to find out. The man had abandoned his mother when she needed him the most, and left Kushina to fend for herself. It was only because of the savings that his mother had from her ninja career that she and Naruto had been able to get by for a year. What might have happened later was unknown, as Kushina had been one of the many shinobi in Kunoichi cut down in the Kyuubi attack. The only memory Naruto had of his mother was of her kissing him goodbye one night. Given the red glow that was emanating from the windows during the memory, Naruto assumed that it was the night of the Kyuubi attack. The last time he had seen her. Ever since he had been old enough to understand his mother's sacrifice, he had thrown himself into training and research. Research about his history and his ancestors, training to become the greatest shinobi he could be, and to establish the name Uzumaki once more. It was not a dream to him, it was an eventuality. One way or another, he would make the name Uzumaki known to the world once again. Chapter 1. Knowledge is Power. Hot damn. Naruto screamed mentally as he dodged yet another hail of thrown shuriken. Backflipping toward nearby tree, the 11-year-old Chunin was forced to Kawarimi with a nearby log to avoid death by impaling. 4 kunai embedded themselves in the wood as Naruto made it to safety. Deftly regaining his feet after his impromptu substitution, Naruto phased into a soundless, smokeless shunshin. He reappeared, engaging his attacker with a flurry of deft jutsu strikes, all aimed at nerve clusters, specifically targeted to cause pain in numb extremities. Unfortunately for the young blonde, his assailant proved to be just as dexterous as he, as all the debilitating strokes were blocked. Moving quickly to take the advantage in the close-range fight, Naruto felt the cold metal of a kunai slip into his hand in a practiced movement. The assailant dodged a sweeping slash at the throat with almost casual ease, moving quickly to place distance between himself and Naruto. A Sujin. Sujin Haki quickly sprung up from nowhere to combat Naruto's retaliatory Kakakyu no Jutsu, an impressive feat considering there was no readily available water source nearby. Across the clearing, Naruto flipped through a series of seals as he cursed his locating affinity. It was a situation that irked him constantly, and came back to bite him in the most annoying ways. I would have inherited the Uzumaki Sujin nature from mom while living in Fire Country. True to his host nation's name, Konoha was the world's leading village in terms of Kaiten nature techniques. It was Naruto's luck that he was affiliated to the elemental opposite of fire. His reverie was broken as a thick mist covered the area, and the blonde boy scolded himself for getting lost in though. He smirked slightly, however, as he felt his chakra lot and mist settle itself over the clearing and surrounding area. His jutsu had worked perfectly. Using the enhanced mist to seek the chakra signature of his attacker, Naruto moved his position discreetly for minimum acoustic amplification. This was exactly contrary to what most practitioners of the silent killing technique would do. The technique required that the user be able to detect any and all presences within the mist, and acoustic amplification was one of the most popular ways of going about that. Unfortunately for many practitioners, the technique became well documented after Kurigakure had used it to deadly effect in the Second Secret Shinobi War, and many had devised ways to combat it. Many Akirinin had been killed after having their eardrums burst, due to loud noises made to deliberately debilitate the would-be silent killer. Recognizing this fatal flaw in a technique that had many uses for a ninja with Naruto's skill set, the child shinobi had worked to devise a way around it. After executing the Kurigakure no Jutsu, Naruto would then spread chakra from his body in an outward wave. Chakra, as a combination of both physical and spiritual energies, could be, and would be, absorbed by any organic matter unless otherwise acted upon. The sole exception was the human body, an entity that had so much chakra in it by nature, and one that automatically combated foreign substances attempting to enter it. The result was that Naruto could almost immediately perceive any and all humans in range of his wave, without the use of acoustic amplification. Ninja especially, as their bodies had so much stored chakra they were like beacons to his senses. He was still working on a version of his mist that would automatically help him detect chakra signatures, and was unnoticeable. Sensing his chakra rebound off of what appeared to be a human shape, Naruto burst into motion. Palming twin kunai from his holsters, Naruto silently charged through the mist before slicing the throat of his attacker with a dual-bladed cross slash. The effect was immediate, and the body of his assailant dropped lifelessly to the ground before crumbling into earth. While normally a cause for concern in a fight, Naruto was exactly the opposite as he let his mist dissipate into nothingness. Why should one be concerned after destroying one's own clone? It was a training technique that Naruto had been using more and more lately. There truly was no better way to hone one's skills than by fighting an equal, and who was more equal than a clone. While the Tsuchi Bunshin was mostly restricted to favorable terrain, i.e. Earth, there was hardly a short supply of the needed material, especially in the training grounds surrounding Konoha. Stopping in numerous places around the slightly larger training ground 9, it had been forcibly expanded due to collateral damage inflicted by Naruto himself over the years. Naruto collected his strewn weapons, before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. While he could use the technique without the need of smoke, it required an intense level of focus that Naruto didn't feel the need to expend for something as mundane as speedy travel. Reappearing in Konoha proper, Naruto immediately took to the rooftops, knowing all too well the dangers of using shunshin in the streets. He had nearly killed himself running headlong into a merchant stand, shortly after he had learned the technique. I really should mention that in the scroll, he mused thoughtfully, a tinge of leftover embarrassment coloring his cheeks. He had caused quite the scene that day, so much so that the Anbu had to be called to sort out the commotion. Upon reflection, the Anbu were being called to police the village more and more, what with the absence of the former military police force. Made exclusively Uchiha clan shinobi, the military police force had been a casualty of the Uchiha massacre, as well as the entire clan save one. Naruto merely hoped that Uchiha Sasuke would prove to be an asset to the village, like he himself was. Konoha was always in need of new blood and talent, and Uchiha Sasuke was said to be promising, at least according to Mizuki, who had ended up as one of the boys' academy instructors. Although, maybe not exceptional, Naruto mused. The boy was 1 year younger than Naruto himself was, and was still in training at the Konoha Ninja Academy. Naruto had already graduated by that age. Having been a member of the Konoha Ninja Corps for over a year, Naruto had had time to see how truly exceptional he was, at least for his age. But, some people matured and gained strength differently and at different paces. That fact was more apparent to Naruto now more than ever. Ever since graduating from the reserve program, Naruto's once large leaps of strength and prowess had regressed to baby steps. It was endlessly frustrating to the now 11-year-old Chunin. He had goals that he needed to accomplish, and he couldn't do that while he was taking baby steps toward prowess and skill. Maybe I'm just getting stronger in different directions, the flaxen-haired boy reflected. While his learning of ninjutsu had tapered off recently, mostly due to his limited chakra reserve strong for his age he may have been. But he was still only 11. There were many different and diverse sectors of shinobi skills. And Naruto was nothing if not curious and thirsty for more knowledge that might help him. That very thirst for knowledge is what led him to where he was now, Konoha's Grand Archive. 3 stories tall and with its girth taking up an entire street block, the Grand Archive was the second largest building in Konoha proper, second only to the administrative building, which served as the general shinobi headquarters, and housed the Hokage. The archive was a perfect circle and had a large engraving of the leaf symbol on the side facing outward toward the walls. Naruto shook his head fondly. He would never tire of seeing the grand building, and that was saying something, as he spent much of his free time perusing the thousands of scrolls it housed, even more so now. As he had no other way to occupy his time in between the various C-rank missions he ran with makeshift squads and training. Moving forward briskly, the 11-year-old Chunin entered the towering oak doors that were always open, flashing his Shinobi ID card to the 2 Chunin guards stationed outside. The card was very simple, and issued to all Shinobi of Konoha. It held his name, date of birth, Shinobi ID number, and rank. The latter was the most important, as it gave him his clearance level. While the Grand Archive didn't hold any ninjutsu over the rank of B, one could find a whole host of subjects covered within the Great Dome, ranging from standard shinobi skills to history on the very elemental nations. With his B-rank Chunin clearance, Naruto was allowed to peruse nearly the entirety of the library, save the A-rank sections. While nearly all of the sensitive information regarding some of Konoha's more covert operations, most all of them in times of war, were held either in the administration building or in Anbu headquarters, the Grand Archive held a small amount of declassified records. These records were reserved for those with A-rank security clearance, i.e. the Jonins, and were mostly historical in nature. Naruto didn't care so much about the semi-sensitive information that the archive held. No, he thought as he swiftly made his way over to a section of the archive that held detailed scrolls on human anatomy, my interest lies within shinobi skills. At least for now. The archive held everything he needed to know about being a shinobi, security clearance or no. For that was what the archive was, really, a grand library containing all of Konoha's amassed knowledge about the shinobi arts. Finding his needed section, Naruto pulled out a scroll detailing medium-range hand-to-hand combative techniques and information. In medium-range combatives, 2 opponents are already within touching distance. The arsenal of possible body weapons includes short punches and strikes with elbows, knees, and hands, though bladed weapons are not excluded. Headbutts are also effective, do not forget them during medium-range combat. A shinobi uses his peripheral vision to evaluate the targets presented by the opponent and choose his target. The shinobi should be aggressive and concentrate his attack on the opponent's vital points to end the fight as soon as possible. A shinobi must be cautious, however, and be mindful of his surroundings at all times. Moving downward quickly, Naruto skimmed the introduction, as he had already read it, and moved to the section detailing the various kill points in the human body. He already knew the 8 vital spots. The heart, lungs, liver, jugular vein, subclavicle vein, the brain, the kidneys, and the spine. They were basic facts that were necessary to know in the Reserve Academy. While the regular academy trained boys and girls to be genin, beginners in the field of the shinobi world, the reserves trained genin to be chunin-level shinobi, to be killers. The difference was a significant one. He was more interested in points that could be used to directly incapacitate an assailant, whether through the use of weapons or otherwise. It was an essential skill that all the most heavily trained, heavy combat-oriented Anbu had. Given that Naruto strived to be a squad captain in the elite shinobi corps, even if only to one day secure the coveted rank of Jonin, it is a skill that he thought necessary to have. When he submitted his application to join the most elite shinobi unit in Fire Country, he intended to be well ahead of the curve. His musings and dreams of future Anbu success were abruptly cut short as he felt a soft hand ruffle his blonde hair none too gently. "Well, hello there, Naruto-kun." A familiar voice spoke in a sing-song tone. "Ugh, you're off, will you?" Despite his less than favorable response, a grin could easily be seen on the face to the 11-year-old. "I'm trying to study here, you know." "Ah, but that makes you no fun, Naruto-kun," the girl, now identified as Mai, said in a sing-song-like voice, as she plopped down in a chair across from Naruto. "All you do is study, study, study. Honestly, you need to make time for other things." The voice took on a more serious, solemn note as the girl lectured. His head now free of its momentary turmoil, Naruto raised his eyes to meet those of Mai's, and he couldn't stop a small blush from forming as he observed the older girl's form. With her auburn hair tied into a full, elegant knot at the top of her head and 2 long strips falling into her face, Komi Mai looked a picture-perfect teenage librarian. The effect was only accentuated by the flowing, sun-colored dress she wore. Form-fitting and skillfully crafted, the dress hugged the teenager's near-perfect figure, so as to leave little to the imagination. In moments of reflection, Naruto would readily admit to having a crush on the 16-year-old girl. He was an orphan with unknown heritage, unwanted, unspoken to by most of the village, and, for the most part, unacknowledged for his skill. Mai had been his first real friend, not to mention the first female to ever talk to him outside shinobi training. The fact that she was undeniably beautiful only helped the matter along. "No, you know that's not all I do, Mai," Naruto replied with a pout that Mai found adorable on his boyish face. "I eat, sleep, train," he finished rather lamely, realizing that he indeed did spend the majority of his time training in one way or another. Whether it be in the archive, on a mission, or in the training grounds, Naruto's life almost constantly revolved around his shinobi career. Mai raised a well-manicured eyebrow in question, before sighing quietly. Naruto immediately felt bad. He hated to see her unhappy, especially with him. "That's what I mean, Naruto-kun. You need to make time for other things besides being a shinobi." She raised a hand to stall his protest. "I know all about your dreams. You've told me before, kiddo." Here she favored the young Chunin with a small smile to which he smiled sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head. He had told Mai of his life goals on more than one occasion, and with great relish. The smile faded quickly as the auburn-haired beauty returned to her lecture. Being a ninja shouldn't be the only thing you care about, goals or no goals. I was the same way once you know, before well you know. Indeed Naruto did know. Mai had been a kunoichi until 2 years ago, a very talented one at that. She had made genin at 11 and had remained so for 3 years. Her mission record was sterling, containing 47 completed D-ranked missions and 24 C-ranked. She was on the fast track to success as a kunoichi, and would have been if not for a debacle in her final Chunin exam. Her sensei, Winrukishu Aoi, had nominated her team for the Chunin exams once before, in Konoha, and they had failed the secondary part of the exam. While Aoi wasn't a man generally known for his prudence or intelligence, he had held the team back for 2 solid years of training and missions, before nominating them for another Chunin exam, this time in Sunagakur no Sato. The team had made it all the way to the finals, a 3-on-3 team battle between squads, when Mai ended up squaring off with the kunoichi from Kumagakur no Sato. They had ended up as the final members of their respective cells. Both other members had been previously eliminated, one Konohanin dead, and fought each other for the promotion to Chunin. Mai had been soundly outmatched by her older opponent, and had been caught in a chakra conductive net that was a favorite of Raiden users. Not giving Mai a chance to surrender, the Kumo Kunoichi had channeled her Raiden chakra through the net, and managed to fry all of Mai's nerve endings almost beyond repair. It was only thanks to the timely intervention of one of Suna's medics, an elderly woman named Chio, which had allowed Mai to regain some semblance of her former motor skills. The medic had managed to ensure that she would be able to lead a relatively normal civilian life, though Mai never had the option of being a ninja again. It was a sad fact of shinobi life. Shinobi and kunoichi alike were often injured severely or cut down before their time. It was because of this that Mai often tried to get Naruto to think about life outside of being a ninja. She felt that at his age, he should be more focused on having fun with his life, rather than training to be a killer. One never knew when one might be killed, after all. Naruto's eyes were cast downwards, and his face set in a grimace as he recalled Mai's past. He knew why she always encouraged him to study less, and her reasoning was sound. He was intimately familiar with the perils of shinobi life, having his mother taken from him by the Kyuubi, since almost before he could remember her had instilled that piece of knowledge into him at a young age. It was also because of that fact that he knew he would never, give up being a shinobi, not until he was satisfied that he had made her proud or he was dead. Anyway, the auburn-haired girl continued with a bright smile that Naruto couldn't tell was fake or not. I think that's enough depressing shit for one day, don't you Naruto-kun? At his nod and bright smile, her own widened. So, what's new, kiddo? Naruto couldn't keep a small blush from his face as he watched the older girl smile at him. She really is pretty. The blush deepened as she raised an eyebrow at him in question, and a sly smirk crossed her angular face. Naruto floundered, raking his brain for what she had just asked him. He had been paying too much attention to her face and not her words. Taking pity on him while chuckling at his reaction to her, she repeated herself. I asked, what's new, kiddo? Oh right. Naruto chuckled nervously while rubbing the back of his neck in embarrassment. Mai had the singular ability to make him flustered. It was vexing to the nth degree for the 11-year-old. He didn't quail under the harshest of glares from bandits, allied jonin, or academy teachers, yet a 16-year-old girl could fluster him no matter what. Naruto blamed his emerging hormones. Oh, nothing much. I'm meeting with my new team today. The well-manicured raised eyebrow met his response. Really? I thought you had a team already. Naruto shook his head in the negative. I did, but it was just a rotational squad. We only did a few C ranks and patrol duty runs around the border. This one should be a more permanent squad. The rotational squad system was a system designed to allow rookie Chunins to get their feet wet and learn to adapt to the Chunin lifestyle. Most squads didn't stay together for more than a few months, and only ran simple missions. This was a part of rookie Chunin's probation period. At the end of a Chunin's probation period they would be shuffled into an existing squad, in order to take higher level missions. Mai nodded her head in acknowledgement. So, what are you studying? Something to help with your new team? Naruto shook his head again. Not quite. Just a Taijutsu manual. Mai looked surprised. Oh? I thought you were plenty good at Taijutsu. Why aren't you looking up ninjutsu? I know that's all I did when I was your age. Naruto smiled at the compliment towards his skill, hidden though it was. There's no real need. I wouldn't be able to use most of them yet. I just don't have the chakra to throw around ninjutsu all the time. It was true. Though Naruto was gifted with a slew of natural talent, he wasn't gifted with an abnormally large chakra capacity. Well, it was large for his age, and that was only because of the amount of intense training he put himself through, at least in comparison to other 11-year-olds. It was still too small for him to throw jutsu around like party favors. It led him to his exploration of the other areas of ninja life, mostly Jinjutsu and Taijutsu, and he hoped would help him develop into a well-rounded ninja, rather than the ninjutsu-oriented shinobi that were the norm. Sneaking a peek at the scroll that Naruto had been immersed in, Mai grimaced when she caught sight of the title. Mid-range combatives. Her grimace was warranted. The scroll was basically a detailed list of the quickest ways to kill someone hand to hand. Naruto's hand found its way to the back of his head yet again. Yeah, I figure that if I'm pretty deadly up close, it'll help me compensate for my lack of chakra, and open up space for ninjutsu when I get a little older. The auburn-haired beauty conceded the point. It made sense, as Naruto's points almost always did ramen being the greatest food in the world aside. The feelings of bemusement remained, however. It was simply too surreal to see an 11-year-old, both reading and passionately expounding on the various merits of being able to kill a man 16 different ways from within 5 feet. It didn't curb her interest, however. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. An eyebrow was raised as she thought of something. You can't really practice this stuff on your own, can you? It was true. While Taijutsu katas could be practiced solo for hours on end, true proficiency couldn't be achieved unless those same katas were drilled through combat, be it sparring or actual life and death struggles. Naruto nodded. Yeah, but I've got a pretty good training partner. That and I get some free practice when I get to round up bandits on some of my missions. Oh? Who do you practice with? Aside from myself, I practice with a guy named Mizuki. Taoji Mizuki, Naruto elaborated when the name had no effect on his friend. He's an instructor at the academy. Mai nodded in acceptance, though not in recognition of the name. Ah, that makes sense. You get to practice with an older, more experienced shinobi, while he gets to keep his skills sharp. Naruto smiled. That about covered it. A mutually beneficial partnership, he proclaimed proudly. Mai blinked twice, before bursting into a fit of giggles. When it became abundantly clear that Naruto had no idea why, as evidenced by perplexed look and growing blush, she spoke. Sorry, it's just that me and Gendo had a conversation where that phrase came up. She burst into another round of giggles before finally managing to compose herself. It sounds like an official title for a gay relationship. At the proclamation, Naruto's blush deepened. While young to be familiar with the concept of sexuality, Naruto was both observant and curious. It helped that he spent most of his time around people twice his age. Naruto searched for a way to restart the conversation, preferably around different topics. You and Gendo-san talk about that stuff often. He winced at his failed attempt. And what stuff could you possibly mean, little man? A voice questioned from behind Mai, as a pair of lean arms wrapped around her neck and torso. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. Gendo-kun. Mai squealed in delight, turning to plant a kiss on her boyfriend's cheek. Naruto grimaced in disgust, whether because he found the action distasteful, or because he found Kawasaki Gendo distasteful as a whole was unclear. Kawasaki Gendo was the civilian son of a well-to-do merchant. Not overly wealthy, but well off, Gendo spent his days in relative luxury, going to Konoha's top civilian academic school, learning to run his father's business, and spending time with his girlfriend Mai. Handsome, relatively wealthy, and Mai's boyfriend to boot, Naruto had plenty of valid reasons to hate the 16-year-old. He would have loved to as well, were it not for the fact that Gendo was a genuinely likable person, if not the sharpest kunai in the holster. Mai-chan, the teen responded, while turning his girlfriend's face to plant a firm kiss on her lips. Naruto looked away at that. Likable or not, he took no pleasure in seeing the older boy kissing his crush. Lightly slapping her boyfriend on his shoulder, though not truly protesting his actions, Mai pulled away. Gendo-kun, do you have to do that here? She chided lightly, gesturing to the library itself, but meaning the immediate area, in front of Naruto. If Gendo caught her meaning, he didn't show it. Aw, you know you like it, Mai-chan, and did you forget that we had a date planned for? He paused, taking note of the time for dramatic effect. Right now. Mai gasped lightly. Oh, I completely forgot. I'm sorry. Turning to Naruto, she addressed the lightly irritated 11-year-old. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, but I've gotta run. I'll talk to you later. Naruto forced a smile, none too happy about having his company taken away. Sure thing, Mai, I'll see you later. Mai planted a quick kiss to his forehead, drawing a small blush that Naruto quickly worked to conceal. Bye, Naruto-kun. See you around, kiddo, Gendo added with a smile and a wave as he left with Mai in tow. Naruto said weakly, alone once more. Turning back to his scroll on Taijutsu, he sighed, before rolling it up and moving to place it back on its proper shelf. He had long since memorized it anyway, today had merely been a touch-up. Glancing around the archive, the world seeming all the more dim without Mai's presence, he swiftly moved to the section devoted to Jinjutsu. Passing a pretty, dark-haired woman in a dress that appeared to be half fabric half ninja wrap, Naruto felt a small smile worm its way onto his face. Jinjutsu was a subject that he could immerse himself in for hours on end. And he had little doubt that his hours would be wasted. The light breeze tousled blonde hair gently as the sun beat down upon Naruto's back. Breaking into the open space of Training Ground 14, blue eyes took in the empty state of the large clearing. Checking, he noted that he was exactly on time. Given the empty state of the large training ground, the blonde immediately knew something was amiss. His danger senses flaring, Naruto was already in motion before his sensitive ears caught the telltale whistling of a Fuma shuriken tearing through the air toward his position. Acting on instinct, adrenaline already coursing through his body, Naruto let the laws of physics go to work as he caught the center of the bladed weapon with his outstretched hand. Allowing the momentum of the famous shuriken to work with him, Naruto let his body be turned around before releasing the shuriken with the force of his own throw, augmenting its initial velocity. Crouching low, blue eyes took in the form of his attacker, a surprised look on his face as his weapon raced back towards him. A fast Kawarimi saved him, however, as the giant shuriken tore into the log that replaced him, indenting itself nearly halfway. The residual chakra from the substitution alerted Naruto to the man's position, and he pumped chakra to his legs for a shunshin, focusing hard not to use any smoke or emit sound. Reappearing in front of his adversary, Naruto had no time to react as a kunai slashed through his neck. The man, dressed in standard Chunin garb complete with flak vest and hit I-8, started in shock as the body of the 11-year-old disappeared in a haze. Jinjutsu, the shinobi thought with a grimace, as his ears picked up the sound of a single footstep, much too close to his location for his liking. To the Chunin's credit, he managed to bring up his kunai to Naruto's neck, as he felt the cold edge of a knife touch his jugular vein. Stalemate, Naruto said calmly, feeling the kunai of his attacker press into his neck. The Chunin, who Naruto could now see had a large scar across his left cheek, smirked slightly. Not quite, he said, as two figures, both dressed in flak vests and with their hit I-8s acting as bandanas, dropped to the branch behind the threatened Chunin. Outnumbered 3-1, Naruto slowly withdrew his kunai from his attacker's neck, though he didn't replace it in his pouch, unknowingly earning a few points with the 3 shinobi, as he kept it held loosely in his right hand. The man opposite him withdrew his own blade, surveying Naruto with visible curiosity, before he stowed the knife. The man, seemingly done with his observation, nodded slightly and cocked his head towards the clearing that made up the majority of Training Ground 14. As if that were the signal they were waiting for, the 2 men behind Naruto's attacker vanished in puffs of smoke and swirls of leaves. The 2 remained for a moment, before using their own shunshins to reappear in the clearing. Facing the 3 Chunin, Naruto felt himself relax slightly, knowing that whatever test had been designed for him was over, at least for the moment. He had expected something of the sort, to be honest, his age having made his hopefully future teammates wary of his skill. It was to be expected, he was only 11 after all, though it was certainly annoying having to prove himself. He just hoped that he had passed his test with flying colors. He had never failed a test save for the bell test, and didn't wish to start now. Not gonna lie, the scarred Chunin began, capturing Naruto's attention immediately. When Central Command said that we were getting an 11-year-old shifted in, I was skeptical. I see the reports about you weren't exaggerated, Uzumaki Naruto. In spite of the professional tone they were spoken in, Naruto could detect the faint note of respect in the man's voice, and it brought a smile to his face. Glad I don't disappoint, though you've got me at a disadvantage, Chunin-san. The man nodded with a small smile, Namiashi Raidu, at your service. The man to his left, who carried an Anbu-grade ninjakin on his back, went next. Jekko Hade. A pleasure, Uzumaki-san, he said softly. Shiranui Genma, the last man grunted as leaned against a tree lazily. Naruto noticed that he was chewing on a large toothpick. As the sun glinted off it, he realized it was a senbon needle. Uzumaki Naruto, but you guys already knew that. Raidu nodded. Naruto noted that he appeared to be the one in command of the squad, at least if this meeting was any indication. For the most part, though your file only included your mission history and academy grades. You want an introduction then? At the nods of both Raidu and Heiei Genma didn't look to care much either way he continued, the name's Naruto. I like ramen, training, and hanging out with a few of my friends, I guess. Images of Mai and Mizuki came to mind. Not too much I don't like, though I hate lazy bastards and idiot dead lasts. My ambition is to become a jonin, and I hope to have a small family one day. Heiei nodded with a smile, seeming genuinely interested in what Naruto had to say, while Raidu shot an amused glance at Genma when Naruto mentioned his dislike for lazy bastards. The senbon chewing man was trying to fall asleep while leaning against a tree. Well then. Raidu began, clapping loudly, both to call attention to himself and wake Genma. Welcome to Team Raidu. Before we start taking missions, we have to run through basic team training. At Naruto's obvious confusion, he elaborated. General formations, battle tactics and strategy, stuff like that. Heiei grimaced slightly, showing his displeasure at the idea, while Genma's senbon nearly dropped from his mouth as he groaned, I hate noobs. Naruto blushed slightly, more out of offense than any embarrassment. He wasn't too fond of being the focus of someone's distaste, especially for such a small reason. But the Chunin teams being shuffled every 6 months to a year, unless the team showed outstanding cohesiveness and talent, basic training was a usual occurrence. It wasn't fun by any means, but Naruto felt that it shouldn't be counted as a chore, especially by an experienced shinobi like Genma. It showed a lack of professionalism. Quite, Genma. Raidu snapped, seemingly sharing Naruto's sentiments. Turning back to the team's newest member, he continued, don't mind him, he's just lazy. I'm going to need to see what you can do, so as to best place you in the squad and develop formations and maneuvers that suit you best. Naruto nodded, eager to prove himself. Alright then. How do we do this? Well, the best way to go about it would be to place you in a combat situation, to gauge how you react to certain things. I didn't get too much from our little tussle back there, other than the fact that you're actually competent, and I need to know what you can do best. The Chunin's eyes lit up as a devilish smirk crossed his face. Why don't you try your hand with Genma there? Balls. Genma only had time to widen his eyes as a blonde blur sped toward him. As he danced out of the way of Genma's retaliatory strike, the laughter of both Raidu and Haid in the background, the blonde Chunin reflected that he would get along with Raidu just fine. Maybe this team wouldn't be so bad. As Naruto would later reflect, the team was far from bad. Quite the opposite, in fact. Basic training, as it was known, lasted only a week and a half, a process that was sped up considerably by Naruto, whose growing proficiency and determination made the tedious drills fly by quickly. Haid and Raidu were impressed, Genma merely seemed thankful. In the months following, Team Raidu took various C and B rank missions, most without incident. Naruto also found, much to his pleasure, that the constant team training and sparring, not to mention the more dangerous missions, had kick-started him from his plateau. Having never been on an experienced team before, the second opinions from Haid, Raidu, and even Genma on occasion, served to greatly increase his learning ability. It honestly surprised him. Training with the three experienced Chunin also served to develop his hand-to-hand skills at a rate faster than he had even thought possible. Sparring with different opponents than he had been used to had forced him to develop faster reflexes in order to counter the unpredictability, lest he get hit. While it wasn't life-or-death experience, Naruto would take what he could get, especially as he wasn't particularly willing to put his life on the line simply for better reflexes. He was ambitious, not suicidal. The determined blonde found that he was evenly matched with two-thirds of his team, though Raidu remained both the strongest and most experienced of the lot. Apparently it was Team Raidu for a reason. He easily outclassed both Genma and Haid in Jinjutsu, while his close-range Taijutsu was probably a little better than even Raidu's, at least in terms of pure effectiveness. With his constant training and sparring, Naruto was nothing if not ruthlessly efficient when it came to dispatching his opponent's close range. In turn, the three older Chunin completely eclipsed his ninjutsu abilities, though Naruto was coming along quickly. Genma, a mid-range specialist, was highly proficient with Earth Jutsu, and liked to use them to work his opponent into a corner where he could make an easy kill, preferably with his trademark Senbon. Raidu, having the largest reserves of the four, was a ninjutsu expert, and excelled with fire techniques and earth techniques both. Becoming proficient with two elements was a skill almost required to become Jonin, and spoke well of Raidu as a shinobi. Naruto had the utmost respect for his commander, recognizing both the man's skills and his experience as a leader. Haid was a close-range specialist with his Kinjutsu, and used a creative combination of ninjutsu and taijutsu to supplement his deadly skills with a blade. Naruto had taken an interest in Kinjutsu, mostly because it was required to have some proficiency in Anbu, and had been receiving some lessons from Haid on the side. In return, Naruto was helping the man create a new technique that involved both Kinjutsu and Jinjutsu. It looked both promising and deadly. With their differing skill sets and experience, Team Raidu was a reliable Chunin squad. Their competency was recognized, and the four found themselves tasked with a B-ranked assassination mission. While not uncommon for Chunin squads to receive such missions, this one was special. It tasked Team Raidu with the destruction of a compound of bandits situated in the heart of River Country, the country that acted as a buffer zone between Fire Country and Wind Country. Killing bandits wasn't a difficult task, but the compound was apparently being run by B-ranked missing nin, a fairly well-known jonin named Kurisuke Hideki. The man hailed from Kumo, and had defected after a failed mission during the height of the Third Great War. Their task was to kill him, whatever underlings he may have had, and destroy his compound that had been terrorizing the plains of River Country. It was simple in theory, perfectly plausible on paper, and certainly doable in execution. A straightforward B-ranked assassination mission, as decreed by the Konoha Missions Office. Unfortunately for Team Raidu, the powers that be never considered that someone else might have been after Kurisuke Hideki as well. There were three signs that something was wrong when the Konoha squad reached Kurisuke's compound. The first sign was that the wooden gates, similar but much smaller than the ones guarding Konoha, were torn completely off their hinges. The second sign was the bodies strewn throughout the small compound. It was a bloodbath. Kunai, shuriken, and more perforated the dozens of bodies strewn haphazardly through the streets, blood dripping from the still cooling corpses. The stench of death hung heavy in the air. Naruto had almost gagged, while the very air that Team Raidu breathed was laden with ambient chakra, an obvious sign of shinobi involvement. The third sign was the silence. Am I going to be the asshole that says that it's quiet, too quiet? Genma piped weakly, attempting to fight growing unease and nervousness with humor. Shut it, Genma. Raidu hissed. He made the hand sign for immediate retreat. Some other force is obviously at work here. We need to return to Konoha immediately and inform the Anbu. They'll be able to handle this. I'm afraid it's a bit too late for that. At the sound of the voice, the Konoha squad spun abruptly, eyes taking in the forms of 3 shinobi, all wearing forehead protectors with the symbol for Wagaker. The body of Kurisuke Hideki was draped roughly over the tallest man's shoulders. A short man, with a tuft of red hair and carrying his Zanbatsu as large as he was tall, stepped forward. His eyes glittered malevolently as he raised his claver. Well, now I've not killed any Konoha trash in over a decade. What do you say, gents? Time for some fun. Hope you guys enjoyed this and stay tuned for the other parts of the fanfictions on my channel.